One. Good morning, everyone. This is Ryan Miller from Go Live Magazine, where our objective is to bring to you a diversity of individuals that broadcast on various live streaming platforms. And I have the unique and discreet pleasure to bring to you a broadcaster from down under. He is from Australia. His background is filled with life experiences which we will not be able to comprehend. And this is just going to be an introduction for everyone to Gabriel, but we're going to experience him over time because the value that he brings into live streaming is very unique. And there are not many channels. I have only know of one other channel that brings anywhere near the content which he talks about. So please welcome Gabriel. Gabriel, good to see you. Thank you for joining us from Australia. And we will have a little lag in communication, but great to see you.
Thank you very much, and likewise, I'm honored. Thank you.
This is going to be great. So, Gabriel, if you don't mind, before you made the decision to come into the live streaming platform, give us a little bit of context as to who you are, your background, and where are you going right now before pressing go live?
Sure. Okay. Well, from where would you like me to begin? I can start from a young age. I can start from this year. Do you have any preference?
Well, if you can give us a little bit of young, middle to where you are now, maybe like a paragraph kind of summary as to through that quick trajectory. And I know that's not doing it justice, but I think if you can kind of
I love how specific your question is. That definitely makes it easier. Okay, well, very quickly, born not being able to speak until between the age of 2 and 3, but could play piano quite well before that. Fluent in 2 languages once I was able to speak. Socially, I would, hence the name retarded genius. So socially, there was nothing really. The theory of MILF didn't really seem to be there. I was told I had social difficulties, etc. But of course, in the 80s, we know that that wasn't really something that was understood. So the abuse started pretty young, and it sort of got worse and worse till about the age of 5, where the physical abuse started by some students. And then that sort of culminated at the age of 10 with a 16-year-old knocking me unconscious after some misunderstood behavior. And basically we now know in hindsight it was autism, but very, very luckily had some sort of savantism with that. So it allowed me to begin to mimic human behavior over the years, which was able to, I guess, get us here where we are today. The abuse sort of got worse. The teachers joined in, some of them, not all, of course. It culminated in 3 suicide attempts, with the third would have been successful actually, but my father found my body before it was too late, and I was in a coma for 2.5 days. Once I was able to get out of that, it was then discovered that I was actually some sort of genius, and we actually thought I was just a prodigal pianist growing up, because I won't get into how, but I was able to sort of break records as a kid in classical piano. So then tried to apply this genius whilst learning the human behavior and developing a conscious, what regular humans would have as a subconscious, where they recognize naturally facial reactions, expressions, human behavior, social interactions. All of that was learned consciously by me. Then a company was formed, still not able to function very well, made a lot of mistakes. The recurring theme is normally getting accused of things I didn't do, sort of like a blind man who pretends to see. So when they walk into a wall, because he's pretending to see so well, people think he's deliberately walking into the wall. And of course, comes with that many negative ramifications. We get to where we are today, which is the discovery of the autism in 2014, the savantism. I had to prove them wrong, and by doing so, I was able to finish the maths degree in 2 years instead of 3, top the uni. I'm now representing them. As I said, I did it as a joke, and now I'm representing them at the nuclear science facility in 2 weeks, and I ended up learning French and Italian simultaneously. After 40 hours, became a teacher at the same school, was teaching the class that I was in. Yeah, I can give you more things. Pilot's license. I ended up learning a few other languages, and here we are today. How's that?
There's one critical piece in there that I'd like for you to touch on, and I think that was. Let me get back here for a second. That was really good because those are some of the aspects of you that I have learned through engaging with you and watching with you. But explain for our audience where you grew up and what
Oh,
caused
yes.
you to relocate into Australia. I think that's a big
Yeah, the
part of your
most important
history.
thing. Most important thing. Well, I was born in Bankstown in Australia, which is now considered, we make a joke about it, but you sort of need a visa to get in there. But went to Lebanon when I was very young. My father fell in love with my mother. One of the reasons being she had the name of his sister who was murdered along with her children and husband in a terrorist attack in 1976. And it was interesting they ever recovered, and we still suffer the effects today, obviously. Going into Lebanon was interesting. By the time I got there, the civil war had progressed. It had exploded because of the fact of the minority Islamist and radical leftism with their perpetuation of terrorist attacks from about 1950 until 1980. And then that resulted in, of course, the rise of the radical right, which we've never seen in the West, I say, since the 40s. The radical right, which, of course, will murder even regular secular Christians who basically aren't Christian enough or not killing enough Muslims or whatever. And they invaded our town where we were when I was 6 years old. And the first thing I remember was the screams of this lady who was about my age now, back then. And we were thrown into the bomb shelter. The bullets were spraying. That was quite interesting. And what happened was we had to run down so quickly that her daughter, who's my third cousin, was left upstairs, and she was still in her cradle. She wasn't very old. She was about 3, I think, or 3 or 2 at the time. And I remember my father's uncle holding her back with the force that I've never seen a man hold down a female ever. Because, of course, the maternal instinct was getting her she was going to run out into the hail of bullets to save her baby, who was still upstairs. She's now married, so we don't have to worry about that. She's married and happy, the girl. But that was pretty interesting. Then going upstairs and watching the hail of bullets from the house upstairs. I won't tell you the whole story, but there's a reason. And basically what happened was that these were like real Nazis, not what regular people get called by the fake left, but actual real Nazis who came down to murder basically most of the village because we were Christians who were more liberal and had friends with Muslims and other Christians and didn't want any sort of trouble. So my father ran out and without any guns, him and his uncle, and they did a few things. They grabbed some of the guns. There was a man who died in front of me, got shot in the neck, as I've mentioned multiple times, which is in the book. So yeah, things like that happened, and that, of course, is going to change your perspective on life quite considerably. And that's it. Yeah.
And the it's. So I want to take a moment for the audience and clarify some things. Those people that have subscribed to our publication have been receiving the gift of various different types of broadcasters and the messages that they bring into live stream. And for your information, Gabriel, some of those have come in through anonymity because of the message that they bring. There's a certain portion of the world which is hostile to that type of messaging. And that part of the world wants to either silence these people's speech through censorship, or they want to cause them physical harm so they are no longer capable of sharing that message. And some of the things that you enumerated as you were sharing your history, real time life experience, some of the words that you use to describe it in a world that has been invaded by different types of thought. We'll call it moral relativism, political correctness. Some of those words to a certain group may cause them harm. I don't believe that's your intention at all, because I have this challenge as well. Our words that we choose to describe something are based upon their true intended meaning, and it's not for us to divide people. It's to draw clarity in our speech when we're
Yeah.
conveying a message. So your life experience is your reality. And the words that you use to describe it, and you're talking the alt-right or the pro-West and those categorizations, people may find that objectionable, but I want to suggest to my audience that if this is starting to cause you pain, please hit the pause button and just let it sink in, because when you experience people like Gabriel and the way he communicates, there's something to be learned from his life experience. So I wanted to put that in there, and I think you kind of agree with that kind of segue there, Gabe.
Sure, yeah, no problem.
So this life experience, you just gave us a soundbite, which to me, I get goosebumps because I have a little bit more context than many, but it is a life journey that many have no concept of. We're covered and blanketed with ignorance, either by choice or we're comforted based upon where we locate. So this is your autism, your savantism, your life experience in beginning Australia, Lebanon, suffering through that horror. Now you've had all these years under you. Now you've made a decision as I understand, you've written a book. Can you share with us what your driver was to start putting this to paper?
Yeah, absolutely. So it became apparent quite recently that perhaps I was not a usual person. And I know we're all special, but it seemed that I might be special in a different way to everyone else. And many things that I can do, I thought were quite normal until I found out that that's actually not the case at all. And on my YouTube channel, I'm testing some things to see whether or not other people can do them. And as I say, the more I find out that I'm a statistical anomaly, and with the amount of humans on the planet, thereby a statistical certainty, I felt it was an obligation to share with the world what it is that I am apparently capable of, and of course, conversely, the things that I am incapable of. In order to not only try and find other people who may be like me or parents of people who may be like me, but perhaps help the world be ready for others who may be like me in the future who come forth.
You know, it's very funny. I was watching you last night, and you were talking about that you are going to be doing some discussion and education on quantum mechanics. Now, I'm not a mathematician, nor am I a theorist. However, I love reading about quantum mechanics. It's just something that I enjoy. So you mentioned that live in a broadcast last night. I'm like, holy smokes, this is portion of what I like to consume in my reading. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to have so much fun listening to you talk about something that many people don't even know what the heck quantum mechanics is. So yeah. It's going to be a true delight. So you take this experiment and experience and put it to paper to see if there's the ability to identify others and to kind of collaborate with others in a sense. What prompted you to come into the live stream platform? Right now, you mentioned that you are doing things on YouTube. I found you specifically on the platform Periscope. What was the reason you chose to bring yourself into the live stream world?
Actually, no, it was almost unrelated. I as a mathematician, and of course, as most people may know, I'm quite left leaning, but irrespective, I like to, as a scientist, put biases on the side as much as physically possible. And so I noticed over 2 years ago that Donald Trump was almost certainly going to win, and I started looking at the mathematics of it and thought, this is going to happen. And especially with my background in the collapse of the Western Society of Lebanon, I saw all of the same signs, etc., etc. I noticed an article that was printed in an Australian newspaper of a gentleman called Scott Adams. I read the article and I thought, this is a person who has predicted what I'm predicting, but from a different perspective. And he was on Periscope. So I subscribed to listen to him. And then there was one day, I had a few followers. I wasn't really using it much myself except to listen to him. And one day in one of my bouts of depression, I just had this rant. You could call it a voice from God. You could call it, some sort of episode. I just had to get what was in my mind and heart off my chest and head. And the next day, my followership went up to, I think, 150 or something like that. And I just thought, this is strange. People want to hear the inner workings of the demons that play with my mind. And if I can, it did help provide meaning to the suffering, actually. And that, I think, was the medicine that kept me continuing on that trek. And that's how we met.
It absolutely. We met on Periscope, and one thing that so Periscope has many genres of people that broadcast, and
Yep.
your genre of broadcast is unique. There are not
Okay.
many people that come with a premeditated mission in what they want to do for themselves and what they want to promote or encourage with their audience. So that
Hmm.
I'm going to say is a very small percentage, around 10% from this. It's my opinion, but that's my view. It's a very small piece. And
Okay.
what has been your experience with the audience that you've gotten thus far to the engagement, the responsiveness, the openness, the disagreement? What kind of feedback have you gotten from the audience thus far as you've been going down this journey?
Thus far, I would say above 99% has been nothing short of positive. The support has been phenomenal. It is to use the words of other people, it is surreal. It feels undeserved, and therefore simultaneously this feeling increases my obligation to continue, even when there are times when I don't want to. I just am shocked by the amount of messages of support and love and fascination and that have come through from people, and the fact that it's helping them, and it's helping them identify with their own pain, and helping them deal with that as well. I just can't explain how amazing that is. It's an amazing feeling.
So one thing that I have noticed myself is that you have other individuals on Periscope that have their own mission. And I can speak specifically about a guest or a person we know in common, and that's Eva. I refer to her as Maid Marian, who is dealing with the topic of narcissist and narcissistic abuse and how to triumph over relationships and narcissistic relationships. And
Yeah.
what I see happening with you is that you're being pulled in other directions. Your passion and your will wants to bring your life experience and gift into multiple domains in support of others, which is a beautiful thing to see because it's a real contribution to those audiences. And I can say so I have been selected by Go Live Magazine to be a hosting these interviews. And I was vetted by Go Live Magazine just based upon the way I conduct myself on live stream, what my
Okay.
messaging is on live stream, and how I manage those that contribute to it and those that undermine it. That's we're commonly called the trolls.
Yeah.
And you happen to see one of the things that I was involved in, and then you came in and by no request, you just dove in and started talking about some of the things that I'm involved in. So
Yeah.
you are very unique in that way in your efforts on live stream, that it's not just about what your mission is. Your mission is the world and those aspects which happen to touch you in that moment. Do you think that's my observation?
Yeah, articulately put. I didn't even think of it but that way, but now that you said it, I'm like, yeah, actually, wow. Pretty acute observation, incisive.
And you had you shared an observation last night, which I thought was very cool. And I'm not going to be able to say it correctly at all, but we wind up appearing as those. I forget how you said it. You said it very well. But as I'm an advocate to help people be safe online, I
Yeah,
have the appearance of someone that could cause great harm to those people online.
absolutely. That's well put.
And that's very valid. It gave me a point of reflection for myself. You opened a door to me, and I thought, holy smokes, that's very true. I have the skills and technology and resources to create
Yeah,
tremendous harm, but my integrity pushes me against that. So, and I
exactly.
think
Yeah,
you have the same issue.
yeah,
You have the same issue that you have been blessed with a tremendous amount, and it's about how you're going to carry that forward. So this is not related to my questioning, and it's an important thing from me. I shouldn't say from me. I believe that humans have the ability to be easily distracted. and
Hmm.
we have the
Yes.
propensity to do things which can be pretty horrendous. And the
Yep.
only ability for us to not do things which are horrendous is based upon visibility or accountability.
Hmm.
Do you have people that speak into your life relative to who you are and your mission?
I'd say some of the top guests who call me up at times, who were there from basically the beginning, from my first rant, from before the first rant, actually. And they like to remind me to get back on track, which I unfortunately have the unique gift slash curse of avoiding the track. So they're pretty good at being straight up. But as much feedback as I can get, the better. I'll never say no to
Well,
that.
I understand that criticism because I receive that too, because I suffer with other mental afflictions, not autism or savantism, but I have my own head trash, and the way I see things in my brain is quite unusual. Um, and being distracted, we call that squirrel. We're going down a rabbit hole,
Yeah,
and people bringing you
that's the
back.
one. Yeah.
And that's not that's a distraction to me. I have no problems being redirected. I'm talking more about moral compass, ethical compass. For
Yeah.
me, I'm okay you getting distracted. That's not a big deal because whether you come back to a topic, there was a reason you went down that path. And whether you rejoin the path or not, that would not be a criticism that I would offer. But I would ask, are there people that ask questions about what are you who are you really, and are you going to stay on the path of who you are really? Somebody
Yeah.
that has been through that personal vault of Gabriel.
Yeah.
Have you allowed people into that spot?
Interesting. I can, I guess at best I can ascertain that there is a vault uh, through which there is no entry, and it's probably locked in such a way that even I don't get in. And it is true that everyone does have a capacity, I think, for disaster. My naivety up until this point is what kept me good, without even the understanding that there could be a way to even harm anyone. And that part of that, not only is that naivety, but also autism. One of the side effects of autism is an insanely strong sense of justice, to the point where if someone offers me chocolate milk, and if this happened, I've mentioned this before, right, without getting too much detail. But if someone says I'll be there in 5 minutes and they're there in 6 minutes, it infuriates me. But I've learned to deal with that as a human. So whether or not that disappears, I don't know. But I have been, as most people know who know me personally, have known that I've been in a position of power and things in the past, and my mind doesn't even come to want to do anything to anyone. Unfortunately, that might be a gift or curse. But
And
have I
I
misunderstood your question?
know that's really good. I'm just going to take that one step deeper. And as I started out the broadcast, I said this may go in different directions based upon free flow. Um, my wife is in the field of psychology, and I've shared with her my experience in talking to you, and I've studied on autism and Asperger's and your extreme sense of justice. And when I told her that, she just busted out laughing. She thought it was the funniest thing. And it was so funny just the other night when you were picking up your roll call for your travels, and you shared with us that you are from point A to point B. Here's the job. I pick them up here. I drop them off here. Everybody else accommodates and drops people off at a midpoint, which is not allowed
Yeah,
in the rules. And
yeah,
it drives you insane that I'm not going to do that. And that's your sense of justice and following
yeah,
rules. And I shared that with her, and she just started laughing. So
yeah.
I get those aspects of autism, which I think is a gift for others to behold, because you're following this righteousness, which people don't have that understanding of that rule. But
Mm.
you had shared that we all have that vault,
Yeah,
and for you, you acknowledged that it's closed with no entrance in, not even your own entrance in. If
yeah,
I'm hearing that correctly, uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
do you see a value to yourself and or
Hmm.
building relationship with a person that can go in there to open that can even bring the power of your messaging into a greater light?
Oh, look, I mean, that's how can I even say no to that? Imagine there is nothing more beautiful than letting your light shine. I mean, what else? For what other reason can we be here as to not make the place a better place for everyone else? And if that's possible, then if I have to do whatever it takes, then so be it. Yeah, yeah,
So, and that's a beautiful thing. I would suggest that the internet is not the safest place to vet people for that kind of experience. That's kind of like a client clinician relationship.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I based upon my limited visibility into your messaging on live stream, and and I can't imagine what the book is going to be like. But your ability to continue shed light. I want to share with the audience at Go Live, because of Gabriel's autism combined with his savantism and his ability for recall. One of the things that I found very enjoyable about his messaging was his understanding of global history from ancient times to modern times, with political leaderships, different structures of government, leaders inside of governments, different types of governments. I mean, I would have loved for you to travel with Alex de Tocqueville through the U.S. and been a side writer to Alex de Tocqueville. So I think your messaging in that area it just provides additional value. So if there was if you wanted to put a topic area or a category, if you were to put a hashtag about what you were talking about, or try to put a category, how would you identify what you're sharing on live stream? And that's a hard thing for me to even contemplate even asking.
I would say it's a very good question. I would say four-dimensional pattern recognitions.
Four-dimensional pattern recognition. All right. We're going off the rails for a second. Going off the rails. So some people I have shared the way I process information, and the way I personally process information is very visually, that I see things as objects, spheres, prickly balls, rectangles, triangles, obelisks that have depth with various sizes, colors, and texture, with various lines, various sizes, weights, colors, circular, angular, some are dashed, some are, and they are all connected to other thoughts, like bubbles that are constantly moving through a conversation. So I can't identify for anyone what that sphere is and what is in that sphere, but that, for me, that's what's happening in my mind. So it is, I wouldn't call it a fourth dimension, but that's what's happening in my brain. So when you said that fourth dimension pattern recognition, I'm like, you just stepped into my brain for a second.
All right.
So how do you take a layperson to understand what fourth dimension pattern recognition could be?
All right. The easiest way is, imagine going into a cinema and watching a movie. Now, everyone in the movie thinks that they're in a 3D world, right? Imagine if the actors were real, right? They are moving in a 3D world, but we know it's on a two-dimensional screen. So that can be the way to compress 3 dimensions into a flat screen. Now, how do I then make that look like 4 dimensions? Well, 4 dimensions would be like having many, many, many cinema screens, all of different worlds, all side by side each other. Each character, each sort of movie, and the characters within that movie are unaware of all of the other screens. But me, as an audience member, actually can walk past one screen, go to the next, see the next scene, go to the next, and go to see the next screen. And what I notice is I notice patterns along those different types of screens. And that's what I call 4-dimensional pattern recognition. What do I see as similar amongst all those screens, and then see a long snake of a pattern to then predict what's going to happen in the future?
There's so many things that I want to ask you that are probably beyond the scope of what the magazine is as far as a general audience, but I'm going to go down there again. you're going into the quantum world and what I think you just described there, and the interconnectedness of all humanity, that at the subatomic level, we are all one form of energy. That if I were in proximity to you, our electrons would be sharing back and forth, that we're not isolated and independent, but we are part of one energy. And one of the most popular theories right now that is coming out in the quantum world is the theory of everything, or string theory, and how I guess to say this in a lower level, that even in the theory of everything and or the theory of string theory, there is the appearance of organization and design, that it's not this randomness. And just yesterday, you pointed out something which is very controversial, but it's known. And you talked about the topic of free will. Can you touch on that just a moment? I just want the audience to hear just a snippet on your description of free will, conscious, subconscious.
Sure. All right. Well, from a scientific perspective, it has become quite matter of fact in the scientific world since the 70s that free will is at best semi-limited and at worst non-existent. And there has been in every single experiment, one after the other, no evidence of free will has actually come to pass, in the sense that the subconscious makes all of the decisions before the conscious is aware of it. There has never been a situation in the reverse. That does not mean it does not exist. It means that there's no evidence for it existing. So that is the difference. My version is that because we live in a world of causality, the cause and the effect are one and the same. Across 4 dimensions, they're actually manifestations of the same entity. And so, of course, whenever you do something, there's a reason for it. So the question is, where is the reason? What's the reason come from? Some people attribute it to a soul. Some people attribute it to God. Either way, you're attributing it to something, and thereby eliminating in one's own argument the existence of free will.
And that from the soul, the God perspective, when you're dealing with the issue of free will or non-free will, we'll call that your life is predestined. That is in most religious themes, that is a division point, because rejection of free will uses an ad hominem and says, what are we, automatons, or are we a robot that is just moist flesh? But I'm thinking that the scientific process is showing us that what we actually think is an action on our behalf is happening as a result of a subconscious activity. That's
Correct.
what science has shown to us.
Correct. That's right. Yeah.
I'm saddened that those pieces of science are kind of hidden, because that requires us to take another look at our purpose. What is our meaning of life? Wow. What is your meaning of life?
My meaning of life changes constantly, but I am in a continued process of trying to discover what that is. And so here we are doing, originally from 2014, I was trying to prove the doctors wrong, and now I'm here talking to you. So in retrospect, the meaning sort of becomes apparent, which is to try and help as many people as possible. And that was normally the meaning. After my last, third and final failed suicide attempt, I thought, look, I'm going to die anyway. I may as well try and help as many people as I can in the process. And that's really where I've been since.
There's often a statement, there are two things that are absolutely certain in life. One is taxes. You will always have to pay a tax. And the other is death. Taxes, we can anticipate and predict. Death, we cannot. Sometimes we can orchestrate it, but we can't predict when it is going to occur. So we have these moments, like the moment we have now, because we are not promised the next moment. That the next moment is uncertain. Where you're sitting, where I'm sitting, a truck could come barreling down the road and just wipe me out. So it's about with the intention of each moment. And I believe that intentional living is subservient to experiential living. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay. Yeah, I would say that the subjective is much more real than the objective, actually. And I didn't used to think that until I got heavily into quantum mechanics and abstract mathematics. And abstract mathematics, one of the most glaringly obvious things that you learn when studying abstract maths, and just to explain to anyone who's listening, if applied mathematics is the computer code that writes this universe, abstract mathematics is the developing of the actual numbers used to write the code, or the letters used to write the code. That's how fundamental it is. And what one learns in abstract mathematics is that it is more real than the real. In other words, whatever we see as real is actually drawn in from the abstract. And there are some things that become more obvious as I get older, which is that there are some fundamental truths that relative to us and relative to time are objective. And this actually comes to values and morality as well. Some people want to attribute that to God. Some people want to attribute that to whatever it is. But without question, that is so glaringly obvious. And just using the process of logic and abstract maths, moral relativism is wiped clean from existence.
This is, man, I would have so much fun having a beverage sitting across the table from you. So do you subscribe that logic exists?
I act as if it does, and the deeper I dig, the more real it is, and the less real this universe is. In fact, it's obvious now after studying quantum mechanics that what we think is real is merely an interaction of fundamental fields, and this real business is an illusion. There is actually an abstract truth which is deeper than the real. And in fact, the only way they can really be represented in terms of how to ought to live and subjectivity really come from truths that we as humans have discovered over the centuries, mostly through Judeo-Christian traditions and others, where there are truths that are so fundamental that they can't actually be expressed in anything but for religious language.
So I use a description for how I understand logic. I consider the laws of logic from a mathematical standpoint, from an equation standpoint, that they're universal, they're immaterial, and they're unchanging. Do you believe that's a fair description of logic?
I can't comment on the unchanging because I don't know what will happen in the future. But as far as
how about
now, absolutely, I'm with you.
How about unchanged?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah. At least for this universe.
For this universe. So I try to look at when did those laws occur? What is the origination of those laws? Because in the materialistic world, you're looking for evidence for how something came to be. So when we're reconciling things such as proofs or evidence or morality, it has to be rooted in those original laws. If it's not, it's inconsistent. It's illogical. It breaks down.
Correct.
That's where moral relativism and political correctness live in this world where they defy the laws of logic. So have you in your examination found where logic appeared, that universality, the immaterialness?
Yeah. No, absolutely not. See, that's the honest position, and we come back to where we were at the beginning, which is I don't know. And some people, like my brother, who is a Christian and with whom I have many discussions, disagrees with me, and I don't disagree with him. I'm not saying that he is incorrect. I'm saying I don't have the confidence to actually know. That's a very honest position. Yeah.
And I think that's an honest, because I believe that is a position that people of faith have something that they can hold on to for the origination of that, and those that do not have that, I guess, special revelation, don't have that. So that it's like, I don't know. And I think that's a fair response.
No, absolutely. I that's one of the things that I admire about honest Christians who admit that there is a degree of faith required, and I have absolutely no issue with that at all. It makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not apologetic that I hold to that special revelation belief that there is a creator and I'm a creature of the creator. Um, then I guess I have again, this is free flow. Um, do you have a thought on, from a mechanistic mathematical perspective, is infidelity biological, chemical, just societal? Where would you attribute human infidelity?
Mm. Well, it depends. I definitely see it. I mean, and this is, I can only talk from a mathematical perspective, so
That's where I
my
was trying to
experience
get
is,
to.
it's
Yeah,
more of a subjective. But it really depends on where we're coming from in terms of gender. So, and the reason I say that is because biologically speaking, there are different reasons that specific genders, uh, from a certain predisposition in general, want to actually be with someone in the first place. And from a guy's perspective and learning human interactions consciously, I can say that the guy's view, especially between sort of 12 and 22, is a very, it's definitely powered by an unbelievably different motivation to women, right, in general. And my understanding is, of course, number one, women choose the partner, and it is up to men to become the most attractive they can possible to enable to obtain the most desirable, fertile woman. And I'm talking from a biological perspective, right? This is not
hmm
on top. So uh, I can tell you that actually there's a better way to answer it. I can't tell you why people have infidelity. I can tell you why it's amazing they even stay together. That's probably the better way to talk about it. Um, right? It's not really. I mean, especially if we look at chimpanzees, we look at most of these primates, and it's not in their interest, desire, or anything to actually want to stay together.
right.
And why is it that we do? And really, what it comes down to, you can call it what you like. I call it pro-West, but ultimately, humans have been searching to develop a civilization through which we can sort of achieve immortality by having children who then have children who then have children. And that Garden of Eden that we are trying to replicate, of course, requires effort. And without that effort, there's no reason to want to stick with someone. So that's sort of, I look at it in the reverse fashion. And so when you have a society that begins to decay because the garden's not being looked after, then naturally you're going to have relationships subsequently decay, which would lead to children who are not being raised in a way that more boys can learn how to be men, women can learn how to be women, and therefore replicate the same fidelity that I guess has been evolving since human civilization began.
Fantastic answer. Fantastic answer. This is a taboo subject, but I don't think either of us are shy about dealing with difficult issues. How would you correlate what you just described to Darwinian or neo-Darwinian thought relative to evolutionary development as to survival of the fittest, which is opposed to what you just described as a healthy, functioning society based upon those roles?
I see society as a way for us to survive in spite of Darwinian survival of the fittest evolution. And that is why it's so difficult. In terms of psychological evolution of the human, we think the way we do now and sort of go against what appears to be the natural instinct to sort of procreate with whomever. I would definitely refer to Jordan Peterson. He is infinitely more articulate and smarter than me on this topic than I think I ever will be.
That's a great reference. That's a great springboard reference. So I want people to be aware that this interview was purposefully different. I wanted the Go Live audience to experience another broadcaster on a platform of Periscope. What prompted him to go live, and some depth into this particular broadcaster, because there are all different missions and objectives behind live streamers. Gabriel has produced a book, and it's self-published, and he's using GoFundMe to provide that book book to people. So this is not only helping him, but actually by getting that book, we're helping ourselves by taking a journey into someone else's thought that we can all benefit from. And Gabe, one of the questions that I often do when I traveled frequently, I would be left at a bar waiting for a layover for a plane. So I'd be in there for an hour, 2 hours, and I'm an extrovert. So I would sit next to any stranger. And the number one question I would ask people as an icebreaker, so tell me about the last book that you read. And I came to find out that reading is a dying art.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to encourage people to bring new life into this death of art, this form of art, and that I will be getting your book. I've created an Amazon wish list because people are always telling me a new book that I should be reading, and I can't go and buy all those books that everybody says I should read. I wanted the Go Live audience to know that Gabe is an unusual individual in the platform. He comes with intention. He comes with purpose relative to an educational. He has identified a hashtag. It's called Pro West. And this is not progressivism. It is not conservatism. It isn't anarchy, and it isn't libertarianism. It is about, he is talking about how, well, let me not say what you're talking about. Tell us what Pro West means to you and what your messaging is.
Sure. Pro West is the inception and continuation of what we have come to know as Western civilization, but really is a human collaboration from almost, I guess, every genetic or social predisposition that we've had since the inception of Homo sapiens. So from Europe, from India, from the subcontinent, to the Americas, to the Africas, we as humans in the mind have been developing what we want as a civilization. And together, as those waves encircle the globe over time westwards, we are now where we are today. And this needs to, and without that, of course, we will revert back to disaster, decadence, beggary, and God knows what else. And so therefore, I say to hashtag Pro West.
So describe for the audience, if you would, because in the West, particularly the United States, there's a significant division. We'll call them a divided house. We'll have a divided house of citizens which sit in one ideological camp of whether you call it conservatism or alt-right or whatever that group is, and its spectrum in that. And then you have on the other house is the progressive liberalism. And those words mean different things depending upon where you are geographically, but those are the pretty much two categories that reside in the U.S. Can you explain how both of those are beneficial and that it's not one, your desire is not one, but it's to the benefit of both?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, sort of, if you have a left and right hand, you don't have them punch each other, or you won't be able to function. And the reason is that it is now it's demonstrably known to be true since for the last 4 years that 50% of one's political persuasion is based upon their biological temperament. And that's important because the world has an infinite amount of information, and yet our brains are finite. And so our brain has to disregard a certain amount of information. So some humans have evolved, and I won't get into why, but some humans have evolved to be able to pick up certain traits or certain things or certain perspectives on the world, and some have developed up, both necessary. So artists, entrepreneurs, creators, musicians, these type of people cannot function if their heads are compartmentalized. So those people tend to have a liberal temperament. Then you have those who make brilliant managers, brilliant policemen, firemen, the military, doctors, lawyers, and they might have a much more, not all lawyers, but they might have a much more compartment. They think of the world in borders, and both are required. Borders are required, and at the same time, flow through between borders is required. And so when someone looks at it from a biological temperament, it becomes much easier to be friends with whom you will disagree, but can see things that you can't. And that requires, number one, knowledge, and requires, number two, humility. And that is something that, of course, has been lacking in America for a while. And this has happened in every society up until America. This is not a new phenomenon. And what happens is the black hole comes in the middle, sucks out the middle, and then you have the ideologies on both left and right, desperate to stay in their own camps before their eventual demise as well. Yeah.
So I'm gonna take that one step further. Is that I agree with you in that we benefit from both people's way of processing information, their life experiences, based upon all those influence, both environmentally and heredity. The piece that is challenging the West at the moment is what I'll call the invasion of the political correctness, which is masquerading words such as inclusion and tolerance, which is devoid of a logical application of those words. So people use the word of you're being intolerant, while they're demonstrating intolerance by being excluding. So it's there, and unfortunately, the ability to continue a conversation that is reasonable and beneficial is thwarted. Do you happen to see that as a symptom of the West?
Question. Yeah, I see that more as a symptom than a cause. I come back to thinking four-dimensionally, and yes. I submit that this is only a manifestation of a society that had lost its value system a few decades prior. And a strong house, if a house is not strong and insects or the wind blows it down, you don't blame the wind. And in the same way, I don't blame the authoritarian fake left. Those type of human beings subject to that virus taking hold of their mind, and it comes from, I suspect it comes from resentment. It comes from being at the bottom, not looked after them in a way. I see people from all losing their value system. We see the corrupt leadership for the last 30 years. Seen, and not to personally attack them. I mean, it happens everywhere in every party. We've seen, God, what's happened to the Democrat Party, but it comes from people not understanding that there is an inherent value system that was passed down and recognized simultaneously by the forefathers of the US, who enshrined it into the Constitution. And when that gets forgotten, we then have this catastrophe where one side starts blaming the other. If only the other side would realize, if only they would listen. They're not going to listen. The society itself needs to be strong enough to be immune from that type of thing. Sorry, you have a question.
No, I'm following with you. That this is really good. So the word value to me has an underpinning of what I would categorize as virtues. Virtues, different virtues combine to attribute what I would call those values. You shared that the West has some of those values memorialized in the constitutional republic's documents. What would you call, many people don't have the ability to define values. Values are fluid. Virtues are not fluid. You can you can have a virtue and you can have an excess of a virtue, or you can have a deficiency of a virtue, but the virtue can be known. Values are very subjective. What would you say has been the de-evolution of a value-based society when a value is unknowable?
All right. Well, when the value is unknowable, okay, that brings me back to how I described the abstract being more real than the real. And what you said is actually a brilliant example of that, where one can look at a virtue and see it as a real manifestation of an abstract value. Now, the values up until about the 18 or 1900s were carried forth through via the Christian doctrine. That was the most recent evolved manifestation of what humans have found to be a value system that has worked and made them more successful than any society in history.
Can I pause for a second? Because
sure.
You're using the word Christian, which I'm not objecting to, but could we take it a step back and call it Judeo-Christian, because it may have originated at the 10 words that were handed to Moses? Could we see it possibly in that direction?
Sure. Well, look, we can see it as Judeo-Christian, or we can see it in my mind, and we don't have to agree. But in my mind, I see, for example, Zarathustran, a Judeo-Christian, the idea of this value system that has been abstract, sort of like when children learn how to play a game, but they can't tell you the rules of the game, but they sort of intuitively know them. And humans, in the same way, have sort of been recognizing these values over the years and have enhance their ability to enshrine them. Maybe Moses did a brilliant job at the time. That sort of evolved into what we have on the Sermon on the Mount. And then, of course, Nietzsche came in and completely destroyed that value system. Ironically, that value system allowed him to do that because of its tolerance and separation of church and state. So ever since then, what we have had is a society that has been unable to figure out what its value system is, because some people have held on to Christian doctrine in a literal sense, some metaphorical, some have completely disregarded it. And so the value system itself has been undermined as opposed to continually enhancing it. And we are in a position now where we have to figure out what those value systems are in a modern sense, that we can all agree, Christians and non-Christians. Otherwise, yeah, it is the end of the society. Yeah.
So, and the very interesting thing is that because of your understanding of your depth of knowledge on history, ancient societies to modern societies, that you can equate to snapshots in time where you can see where the value system has eroded, declined, and devastated a society. And that's where it's often said, if you do not learn from history, you are going to repeat it. And your observations about the West, we can identify changes in that value system and predict the logical outcome based upon that history. Fair statement?
That is exactly right. Exactly right. The only thing I would qualify is that I would say that the West is either everywhere or nowhere. So it is when one Western country declines, it's not as though there's still one left. It is that value system is intertwined. So when, for example, when Lebanon declined 20 years ago, that is a continuation of what was then to happen in France, UK, and then US and Australia, like a domino effect.
I am having such a grand time here, and I hope I'm not taking too much of your time. But I want to go down the morality question, if we could.
Sure.
Where did morality come from? I submit that we are born with morality because we have physiological responses to when we do something where our brain tells us it's wrong. That, for example, when we lie, we have a physiological response. Absent of some brain abnormalities, I mean chemical issues. So where did that come from?
Good question. Well, you were saying absence of brain abnormalities. So that would, therefore imply that it's somewhere within the brain. The question then is that where did the brain come from? And that's, I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. I think we try to figure it out, and it's a continued process.
Do you agree that we all have this inherent ability to distinguish right and wrong, and we rebel against it, even though our body is giving us all of these tells? Your blood pressure goes up, your eyes twitch, you nervously swallow, whatever that manifestation is, it is a tell to us to say, you're going down the wrong path, and you know it's the wrong path, but we reject that path.
Possibly. I know that, for example, studies show that psychopaths don't have those responses at all, even though they may know that it may be seen as wrong. And then you have someone like myself and others who do the wrong thing when they're not even aware that they're doing the wrong thing. In fact, they're doing their best to always do the right thing. So I would submit that it's probably a spectrum. And this idea of what you're suggesting is quite interesting, because I know in my brain that if something is wrong, then I just don't do it. It doesn't even sort of. So then there are breaks in. Yeah.
It's an interesting question for someone who does have autism, because your sense of justice and following rules is on the extreme, and that your awareness of something that violates some external rule, but your internal rules are even harsher than the external rules.
Yep, absolutely.
And so I am curious, when your internal rules are screaming out at you, what is it like to violate that internal rule?
Yeah, yeah. I won't do it, but I think 3 or 4 times in the last 10 years, I have. I remember saying to someone I was busy when I actually wasn't. I just didn't want to see them, and the the sleepless nights that came for weeks afterwards have been something that I still struggle with.
I I do have a couple of questions that would be related to a vault-based relationship, and I'm not suggesting that I'm anywhere near worthy to be a vault candidate, but I would like the opportunity to develop a relationship with you over time that I can open my vault to you to experience some of where I come from, um, and encourage you that you don't need to be isolated with that vault closed and have access to people and or relationships that are trustworthy to help you explore inside of there, because I honestly believe that your self-awareness with your gift and disability, I mean, it's a blessing
Yeah.
and a curse,
Blessing and
uh,
a curse. Yeah, absolutely.
that, that your value will be exponential if you're able to dive into there and reframe it for others to understand, either in metaphor or parable, what's
Yeah.
inside of there.
Yeah, look, if you end up facilitating as a translator, it's invaluable. I mean, maybe that's one of the reasons we met. Oh, by the way, we've got to tell everyone about your Pro West shirts. How are they going? What's going on?
Yes.
Everyone better get
So
one.
that's great. So what we're going to do, Gabriel, inside of this issue, I'm going to do a little write up for the audience to know more about you from my perspective. I'll let you
Yep.
you read how I put that together, and then I'm going to put links to your social media. I'm going to have a link to your GoFundMe for your book, which I'm going to strongly encourage people to dive into that hole. Also, I'm going to
Okay.
put a link. We have put together a T-shirt that is hashtag Pro West, and that is to empower people to use their voice to speak about some of the things that we touched on here today. And if you tune
Yep.
into Gab Smack's broadcast on Periscope, and I hope we can get him additional visibility on other live stream platforms, that we can all be not only empowered, but will be additionally equipped to use our voices. And
Mhm.
sure, we can be challenged, but life is about learning, and it's also about taking action. And
Yep.
we all have different abilities on what we can use as far as action, whether you're an introvert or extrovert. But I'm here to say that some of the things that Gabriel is sharing and teaching um, are empowering, uplifting, and they're not going to have a spiritual undertone, but they're going to have a spiritual undertone. So whether you sit in that spirituality domain or not, there's benefit to be had. So is there anything that, yes, I appreciate you asking about the Pro West shirt, because we definitely want to get that visible, and I've got a couple of them myself, and it is moving forward, which is great.
Okay.
Is there
Good
anything
on you.
that I didn't cover in this randomness that you would like to kind of bring attention to?
Giving a speech or two speeches. One is on the ancient language that was spoken by Jesus and people before him, all the way back to Daniel in the Old Testament. And I'm also giving a speech, of course, on autism and things that are related to that, about how mothers can handle autistic sons, autism and relationships, friendships, how I came to be, etc. And they will be on the 15th of July, Australian time. So it'll be 12:30 a.m. New York time on the 15th. So it'll be early, early morning on the Saturday.
Are
And
you
I
going to
think
be
it's already,
recording? I'm sorry. Are
yes.
you going to be recording those?
Yeah, I'll be live streaming that on Periscope. Yep.
Okay. Would you be opposed if I were able to download those, particularly the autism speech? Because part of my mission is that I have resources that are made available to parents in dealing with children that are connected online, and from autism, ADD, ADHD up to Asperger's. And there's a very underserved community and need, particularly with someone who is mature. Um, they would benefit from what you say.
It's nice to be called mature once in a while. But yeah, no, you're more than welcome. My pleasure.
That's beautiful. So we have the autism. What is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, there's always things going on. Just jump onto Periscope, and my goal ultimately is to find the African Einstein. And so that's why I've set up on Patreon, where people can subscribe. I've been telling everyone it's $1 a month. It's actually 70 cents because it's $1 Australian. Sorry about that. And I have multiple channels on Periscope that people can find me. I teach heavy mathematics on one channel. I teach 6 languages on another channel, and yeah, things like that. That's about it, really. Nothing much
It was
more I
very
can tell you.
interesting. I tuned into when you were teaching Arabic and word clouds and describing it, and that's
Yeah.
very enlightening. And from it's good to be aware and understand different cultures. It gives us a better context and framework. And we have these pre-established rules and thoughts about certain things, and you're introducing the ability to expand that, to break down those rules and say,
Yeah.
look, this is a little bit different. You aren't immersed in this culture. Let me bring this culture to you so you can understand where they're coming from. It's just a beautiful thing. Well,
No, I love that. Yeah, sorry, I cut you off.
no, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that you've touched exactly on something I stupidly didn't even bring up, which is giving people, someone like yourself with your skill set and others around, the ability to make more informed choices and therefore weaponize the West for the future of the West itself. Exactly.
And you use that a lot, weaponize the West. And what this is a weaponization of our intellect. It's not about
Yep.
bringing arms to the discussion. It's about weaponizing the gray matter. And the gray
Yep.
matter is active, that the neurons are flowing. And when we turn into things which are static, like some TV episode for hours, we're not engaging the gray matter. So you're a
Yep.
huge catalyst to get people off of the couch and do something that's mental gymnastics. It's exercise.
Speaking of
Well,
getting off the couch, I think during this interview I burnt 300 calories. So thank you.
you've been bike riding while we've been
I've been bike riding. Yeah.
that's awesome. So what I'm going to ask for you is if you can shoot me all of your links.
Yep.
I'm gonna wrap up the broadcast, but after I wrap up, I just want to send a couple closing words with you personally. So everyone,
Sure.
I greatly appreciated the opportunity to spend some time with Gabriel. I look forward to tuning into his broadcast because for me personally, it's an enriching experience, and can't often catch him live because he's down under, but it's enjoyable to watch. So I'm going to get his links from his different channels. Bear in mind, some broadcasters, due to their messaging, create different environments to talk. So there's a public domain in which people have conversations, and then some of those are membership only, and that you have to pass a certain threshold of security and safety or other metrics to get into those private domains. So I personally manage those kind, and Gabriel does the same thing. So we're going to put access to the ones that are open, and then based upon relationship, you may earn your way into those closed type of environments. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Well, everyone, this has been a great time. It was a non-standard interview for Go Live Magazine, but you got to see a little bit of a different side of me and a different type of guest on live stream. So thank you all, and we will continue to have conversations with Gabriel moving forward. Take care, everybody.
Okay, everyone. Pleasure.
Now, I hope this is going to